All right. Good morning. Hope everybody's doing well. Today we have Dr. Billy Young, who is the lead catalyst for Next Generations Ministry at the Florida Baptist Convention. That basically means he's the busiest person I know, because that means he's handling preschool children, students, and college ministry. So I don't know anyone else in the other state conventions that handles all of that. So yeah, I admire you, Billy, with your ability to handle all of those things for
I
sure.
appreciate the compliment, Brian. On one level, it just means people aren't sure what I'm doing at school, but there's a lack of accountability. Just kidding. But
Right.
fortunately, I have some great ministers in our local churches that I use as kind of consultants, catalysts, however you want to look at that, to really help me in those areas. My wheelhouse is student college ministry, so I'm thankful for those. Even though we've all been the ministers of whatever before, I have a little experience in kids ministry. I'm thankful for some of my leaders in that area, but good opportunity to serve churches and youth and kids ministers.
Very cool. Very cool. I also want to highlight too that this, you might not care that I bring this up, but I always love highlighting the fact that you are a former quarterback for Steve Spurrier. You played for the Florida Gators. You won the national championship in 1996. So, at the end of this, I would like for you to talk a little bit about Tiger Wright Blue Fan Y7 Z under T8. I want you to talk about that play and explain to us why that's your favorite play.
Yeah. So, well, let me be honest. I mean, when you say won, I was a part of the team that won the national title. Somebody had to help the team GPA. True story. I was never a starter. I was the starting holder, if that counts.
I got you.
One year we beat Arkansas really bad, and the opening kickoff was returned for a touchdown. And I was the first quarterback to take the field because I held the extra point. But anyway,
nice.
Only I would know that. But I literally got an award back-to-back spring practices, Brian, for being the Goodwill Gator award winner, because anytime they needed someone to go speak to like an elementary school or something, they would send me. I had a clean record and a good GPA. So just being super transparent about that.
Very nice. That's super cool. I love that. Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about what now, thinking through next steps in student ministry. I know that, for a lot of the guys I talk with, I think there was hope that, COVID-19 we would get to the summer and COVID-19 would kind of, disappear. But that hasn't happened. And so I think for a lot of our guys, they're just kind of curious and wondering, hey, what are the next steps now that it looks like COVID-19 is going to be here for a while? Is there any kind of thoughts, strategies, things that we haven't thought or considered that maybe we should think through? So just curious if you would be willing to talk and discuss a little bit about those things.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, you said a couple things, Bryant, within what, kind of the intro there. We're all facing the reality that COVID-19 is going to be here for a while. My family, my wife and I, we're going to co-coach my third grader softball team. We have 3 daughters, and our youngest 8-year-old, we were going to co-coach the softball team. And I remember in Florida, March 15th or March 13th, they canceled spring break, 2 weeks of spring break, right? Or they extended it. And then March 15th was a Sunday when our, President Trump, said, hey, we're going to shut down for 15 days to slow the spread. That Monday, we went to our local sporting goods store to order the jerseys for our softball players because we were just going to be shut down for 2 weeks. It was going to be behind us. It was going to be over. And just in our world, we were going to start back, going back to normal. None of us knew then that we would be today when we're recording this August 13th. We're still dealing with that. And I think for a lot of our churches, a lot of our youth ministries, a lot of our youth pastors, they did really well. Man, we figured out online. We were creative with, how we connect with students. We were creative with Zooms. Man, I learned more Zoom games, Bryant, than I ever want to learn in my life. We all have the Zoom games, and we were trying to come up with all these. And our youth ministers were were awesome. But we were running as like the 100-meter pace. And then at some point, we've all gotten to the place now where it's not a sprint anymore. We're having to build up sustainable rhythms in ministry and in life of how we deal with the fact that COVID-19 is with us. We've all heard it said, and none of us, I'm not a doctor. I would try to use is it epidemiologist? Did I say it right that time? On my first shot, I feel excited. We don't know. We've all heard, well, the viruses never leave us, right? Well, viruses are here. They're going to be here. So we got to figure out how we manage and deal with it. And I think that's the challenge for our student ministry leaders, for our churches, is in youth ministry. It's not about what's next. It is. It's always about what's next, but it's about how we deal with the now. And because the virus is here, I live in Florida, and if you pay attention, and I quit watching the news about a month ago. I kind of needed a break from it. That and sports talk radio, because it feels like it's the same conversation every day right now. If you haven't paid attention, Florida is one of the leaders. I think technically we lead in total cases. So we're dealing with it in Florida in such a unique way. We have 2 cities that are very international in Miami and in Orlando. And so we have churches that are probably not the earliest they're looking at coming back is in January. So our youth ministries there are all virtual. They're looking at, the school systems aren't coming back. But then we have areas in parts of, rural North Florida and the Panhandle, that our school system started Monday, and our youth ministers are starting to come back. And then we've got everything in between. We've had churches with outbreaks from trying to come back to do in Wednesday nights. We've had churches that change things up, and instead of doing things in their building, we do outside events. I had one church, they were doing a lake day every week. They were pulling kids behind tubes and grilling every week and having kind of social gatherings and teaching God's word to them. And they had an outbreak. We've had churches who went to camps, and some were successful. Some came back. I have one church as of Monday, 23 cases attributed to the people who went to their camp 2 weeks ago.
Ooh.
So we're dealing with it. It's here. And who knows what's going to happen when the schools are back? Who knows what's going to happen when we start bringing things back? So I think for me, and something you and I started talking about a while back is, what do we do now? What do we do next? And 3 things kind of, I want to talk about kind of 3 big picture focuses with how we deal and how we live with COVID-19. The first is this: I think that we have to start with purpose. We have to start with a purpose of why we do what we do. If we're to look and look at our churches, we're to look at what we're called to do, we have to start with why we do what we do. One of my favorite leadership book is not a spiritual leadership book, even though Spiritual Leadership by Sanders and by Blackaby are great resources. My favorite leadership book is Good to Great. And in the book Good to Great, to kind of summarize the premise, is the companies that stuck with their main purpose, that didn't get caught up with all kind of different things, the companies that stuck with the purpose that they were originated with, they were the most successful. And like, it would be a great example that Walgreens, they use in the book, would be, they focused on being they weren't going to be a full medical facility, but they were going to be a convenience store / pharmacy on every street corner that they could be. And that was their focus, right? It would kind of be like this. I wouldn't go to Chick-fil-A for a cheeseburger. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if I go to Chick-fil-A, we're going to get a number 1 with extra pickles. You know what I'm saying? We're, God ordained Jesus chicken, right? So I think in student ministry, sometimes we've gotten caught up with what our purpose is not. And we have to, even when we're coming back, I think, the word essential has been brought out. What's essential? Are you an essential worker? What's an essential? Well, what's essential? What's our purpose in youth ministry? And I go back, we can get as super complicated as we want to be, but I think our purpose is really simple. Jesus in Matthew 28 said this. He said, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And then, so evangelism, discipleship, that's our purpose. Reach students with the gospel, help them grow in their walk with Christ. In Philippians 1, Paul summarized this from a practical standpoint. He was working through this reality of he had a tension to go and be with Jesus or to stay here in this world. And he made this statement I hope that I can get to. He says, I long to depart and be with Christ, which is far better. But he says this, but to remain in the flesh is more necessary for your sake. Since I'm persuaded of this, I know that I will remain and continue with all of you for your progress and joy in the faith. It doesn't matter if we're in a traditional church, if we're in a contemporary church, if we're in a metro area or rural area. Our purpose in student ministry from a 30,000-foot view is to reach students and help them grow in their walk with Christ. So what are we doing right now as we're dealing with COVID-19. It's here. We're walking through safety protocols. I had no idea when I got into student ministry, I'd be focusing a ton on hand sanitizer, wiping down high contact areas, and Lysol wipes and ion spray. I mean, I know, but what is our purpose? Our purpose is to reach students with the gospel and help them grow. Doug Fields has I'm getting along in the tooth, I guess. And you mentioned the 96 national championship team. So, I'm 43 years old. So there was a book that used to be new to me, but it's called Purpose Driven Youth Ministry by Doug Fields. And he puts in there, he talks about what a purpose will do for you. He said, he talks about a purpose statement, but really a purpose. A purpose will clarify your ministry's existence and direction. It will attract followers. It will minimize conflict. It will create personal excitement and will professionalize your ministry. I think when it comes to figuring out the purpose of our youth ministries, purpose of what we do, it'll excite us and get us back. And here's the challenge. Especially dealing with this situation with COVID-19, our parents are really evaluating what brings value to me and to my children. And are we going to leverage our time and energy to go be a part of that? Clarifying your purpose as a youth ministry is going to help you. It's not just going to help you when it comes to your budgets and all those things, absolutely, but it's going to help reach people and help attract families. Man, they're not, it's funny, at least in my experience, and since churches in Florida started meeting again, kind of toward the end of May, beginning of June, and there's been some churches that I've filled in as the pulpit supply on Sunday morning preaching. And what I've noticed is it's not our senior adults that are stopping coming back, but it seems to be a huge percentage of our families aren't coming back in person. So how do we make sure that in student ministry that we clarify our purpose, we keep it at the forefront, we're about what we're supposed to be about, and then as we do that, our families and our will bring their youth and their children and the next gen or whatever back to us. So I think the key for, coming back and how do we process COVID-19 is man, we start with our purpose. And I would say, and there have been times in my ministry that I didn't clarify my purpose for what I was doing. I thought my purpose as a youth pastor was to be the cool guy with the cool hair, which Brian and I definitely have that. But I thought my purpose was just to be the cool guy that had the fun games and back when you could do the cinnamon challenge and chubby bunny with marshmallows, it was allowable, right? But our purpose is to reach students with the gospel and help them grow. So I think the first thing as we, what next with COVID-19, we start with purpose. I think the second thing, and I didn't really try to alliterate, and it's not, I'm just starting with the letter S, but is we see the big picture. In student ministry, when we come back and we're back, I mean, whatever it is, this is the reality for a while. I think that the COVID-19 is going to affect churches probably for the next 2 years in a great way. But how do we work with that? I think the second thing, we see the big picture. There's two pieces to that for me. One, see the big picture in the church as a whole. I don't want to get into what arguments have happened between a pastor and a youth pastor. But it was interesting because everybody was trying to figure out when we were staying home, and I don't know how it's worked in South Carolina, but in Florida it was like, when we come back? And the big question was, we need to come back to worship. We need to come back to worship. And I was on a phone the other day with a senior pastor um, the other day, and he said, you know what? I think we set ourselves up for disappointment because all we were trying to do is come back in big gatherings. And we're not hearing anybody in Florida that's greater than 50%. Most people are 30 to 45% in attendance on Sunday. But here's what he's told me. He said, man, we're about 70% of our people are meeting in small groups, either via Zoom or social gathering around, their back porch or something with their discipleship. And he said, maybe we came out the gate thinking in the wrong way. So I think we see the big picture in youth ministry that we are a part of a whole of a bigger church that honestly youth ministry ends after 7 years. 6th through 12th grade at 7 years. If youth ministry goes past that, somebody either has a Rolodex for their class year on their class ring, or they become a youth pastor, right? Or we need to kick them out of youth ministry, but that's neither here nor there. But we see the big picture, that we make sure that we teach our students, we teach our volunteers that we're part of something greater. But I think the other thing in youth ministry, how do we see the big picture of what we're doing? In specific in youth ministry, man, I know for me, there have been times, especially early on, I was really focused on events. Events are tangible. Events are easy and more attractive to promote. But I think we have to see the big picture when it comes to event-driven ministry versus ongoing programming ministry and that discipleship side. So how do we see the big picture that, man, events are cool, events are great, but our big focus should be finding a way to funnel our students back into ongoing programming. Where I live, big events aren't going to happen for a while. We're dealing with that. Big events are largely have been unsuccessful. Talking to a youth guy the other day about an hour from where I live, kind of same similarity I'm on one side of Jacksonville, he's on the other. And, he said, we came up really disappointed with trying to do, camp at home and all that stuff. And it just did not go well. No, the numbers wise went down. Social distancing is, man, I don't know about you guys, but if you've been and tried to do the social, it is awkward. It is weird. And it's almost unfair to expect teenagers to social distance. I have 2 teenagers in my home. I have 3 daughters, 16 and 13. When their friends come over, we are just honest with the parents. Hey, we're probably not going to social distance. It is what it is, right? But when we come back to church, there's that institutional liability we want to incorporate, but it is hard. But what a youth guy told me, his name is Jeff, and he was like, you know what? But our ongoing programming, that's where we're going to focus on. So how do we take seeing the big picture of youth ministry, knowing events are cool, events are awesome. I mean, I'm a camp guy. I'm talking to Brian here. I know he's a camp guy. I love camps, D-Nows, back to school bashes, whatever thing. The reality is our big events, they're going to be on hold for a little bit. But when we do them, we need to go back to what we probably all agree philosophically, that events and everything needs to push into that ongoing programming. I remember when Simple Church was kind of the hot book, and Rayner and Geiger came out with Simple Church, and it was, man, worship service, one worship service a week, one small group a week, one service thing a week. I'm not here to argue that. That's been said in so many different ways. But if we've ever wanted to get back to being, man, kind of hit the reset button in youth ministry, see the big picture pushing in to ongoing discipleship. I've never had a student in 20 years of ministry tell me that because of some event, now maybe it was something that happened in it, but they saw the greatest impact in their life was through that small group discipleship.
Yeah.
Kendall Morgan, he was in a discipleship group. We used to meet. We met at a Steak and Shake. 3 guys and me. Of course, Steak and Shake would make sense, right? Man, he went to Steak and Shake. He's married now, and he sent me a picture of the booth we used to sit at probably about a month ago. Kendall sent that book to me and said, thank you for investing in me. And when I think about seeing the big picture of what I was called to do as a student pastor, he didn't send me a picture of of some worship service or some, slide we went down at camp or a zip line. He sent me a picture of the booth that we sat at and helped him grow in his walk with Christ. So when it comes to student ministry right now, COVID-19, we're see the big picture and get back to that ongoing, consistent programming. The last thing that I would kind of say when it comes to what next and what now in student ministry is seize the opportunity. Man, seize the opportunity in a couple ways. I wish I could go back to the 26-year-old Billy Young with hair and tell him, man, focus on leaders and focus on parents more. Man, I so wish I could do that. Well, guess what? This is a time where our parents need to be championed and equipped now more than ever. Man, they're all trying to figure it out. Where I live, and I live kind of outside of the metro area of Duval County where Jacksonville is. But we still, what really kind of surprising, my wife's a public school teacher. Over 30% of our parents have opted for online learning, for virtual learning from home. In our metro areas, in Orlando, it's 72% of our students in Orlando are not going back to on-campus learning. Well, if that's an indication, that's what it's looking like in our churches. A lot of them aren't showing back up. But guess what? We all know there's 168 hours in a week. The best youth group kid is 2 to 3 hours. Our parents see the kids more now than ever, especially living at home and doing the virtual stuff. We've got to equip parents. The second thing when it comes to seizing an opportunity, man, it's time to recruit, train our volunteers. There's going to be some volunteers that were working in student ministry that aren't going to come back. They're not going to come back for multiple reasons. Number one, they may not feel safe. Number two, maybe they've been looking for a reason to have an off-ramp, and this is giving them an off-ramp. But I know this, that God always provides the resources we need for the task at hand. And if we're praying, if we're seeking, if we're looking through things, man, I believe God will give us the leaders that we need to lead our student ministry. So seize that opportunity with new potential volunteers, with new leaders in our to work with teenagers, and then seize that opportunity. That I think is the greatest ministry effort for us as youth pastors, and that's relationships. Calvin Carr is now a pastor in Gainesville. Gainesville is the home to the University of Florida, and I make sure I have my hat ready just for Bryant. I know it's the same colors of your favorite team, sort of. I know orange and purple is your favorite team. No way. I'm sorry, Brian. I know you're a Gamecock. I'm sorry about that. Don't hit end on this call. But Calvin is a senior pastor now in Gainesville. And when I first got into student ministry, Calvin was the high school pastor of the largest church on TV in where I lived. He was the high school pastor of First Baptist Church in Jacksonville. And I called Calvin. I was a bivocation. I was teaching school, coaching football. I called the church and asked for the youth pastor, and they gave me to Calvin, and Calvin answered the phone. And he gave me the time of day, which meant so much to me. And he let me come and visit with him for a day. Didn't know me, anything. Just wanted to help. Wanted to help a youth minister trying to figure things out. And I thought he was going to give me, man, like the secret sauce. Some formula, some plan, some elaborate. If I do X, Y, and Z, then I'm going to be the best youth pastor in the history of the world. I'm going to have, thousands of teenagers, and I'll write a book and make a lot on writing and retire early. I don't know. But Calvin told me, he said, the greatest arsenal, the greatest toolbox in our arsenal, the greatest tool in our toolbox is relationships with students. And I was like, well, I'm trying to figure this out. And he said, relationships with students. Right now, man, a phone call is, matters so much. Now I know people are starting to go around, and where I live, we had a ball tournament the other day. 106 teams came to our community and played in a travel ball tournament. And I know that, and I'm not here to criticize parents. They'll show up for travel ball, but not back to church yet because they don't feel safe, whatever. That's not, not the purpose of the call, but the purpose is this. Our students, they're longing for some type of relationships. So whether that's through us or that's through with each other. That's through building volunteers that'll build relationships with students. Seize that opportunity to build those relationships with the teenagers and middle school and high school kids. Man, what next is what's now. I wish, I mean, I think I'm getting a little frustrated, and we're not past COVID, man. It's here. We're going to be dealing with it in student ministry. We're going to be dealing with the church. We're going to deal with it in the world, and how do we figure out how to minister to students and teenagers through this period? It is going to give us an opportunity to be successful for the long haul.
Yep. Well, there are a couple things I was going to just kind of follow up on that you mentioned as I was taking notes, and if you have follow-up commentary, would love to hear it. But number one, your comments about purpose. Always, I think you're exactly right. What I would say for some guys that I talk with, those that they're wanting to follow that purpose without alignment with the overall direction of the local church. And so I think purpose is great, but it needs to make sure that it fits with the overall leadership and direction of the senior pastor and the local church. If you've got your purpose set aside over here and it's not really aligned with what the overall local church's purpose is, I think you can kind of get out of whack a little bit. So I certainly appreciate that.
No,
I would also
just
say this. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But just to maybe fill in the gaps there, and I wrote it down, but I didn't go into it. I didn't know where we were at time. But when I was a youth pastor at my first church, I was struggling with this, and our pastor developed our purpose statement as a church, and it was believe, belong, become. So believe in Christ, belong to the body belong to the church body, and become Christ-like. So we just used that and built off the student ministry of the church. Yep. And it was really simple for us. Yep. What we're going to do, our purpose is to help teenagers believe in Christ, belong to the church, and become Christ-like. Yep. And that fit that evangelical discipleship. So I think you're right, Bryant. A wise student pastor will evaluate the purpose and vision of the church. And a youth pastor did this once. They took the bylaws of the church. Now let that sink in. A youth pastor looked at the bylaws of the church, right? I'm sure that all these guys on the call have right beside their desk the bylaws of the church sitting there, and they study them every day, right? And I'm like, what? He took the bylaws of the church, and the purpose of the church is defined in the bylaws, and he used that as his vision and purpose statement.
Wow.
And I said, where'd you get that from? He was like 1887, and he showed him the bylaws. I'm like, I don't know if that's sarcasm, and you better be careful here, but it was pretty ingenious. The church probably does have a purpose. So Brian, you're right. So use the overall vision of the church within what you're doing.
Yeah, I just think sometimes it's easy to think, Great Commission with students, teenagers, but it's just as much of a win whenever we see that transformation take place in the life of a grandparent or a teacher or a coach. And so I think you're right on. I just think it's easy to, at least I guess I'm talking to myself more than anyone, is that I look back on my time in the local church, and it was easy for me to kind of gloss over areas that weren't necessarily considered within my area of responsibility. And so if I could go back, that probably would be one thing that I would probably do differently. So anyway, I appreciate that. I would also say this too, your comments about, big events and the disappointment that comes with that and what people remember and what they highlight. I would also say this too, some students, they do look at big events as this like spiritual marker, catalyst in their life. But what we found is that really big events, whether it's camp or conferences or whatever, they typically, if a big decision is made, it's almost done in complement to what they've already been taught and learning at a small group discipleship level. So that's one of the things that we always talk about at Somersault, is that the reason why Somersault is successful, though why the camp is successful, is not because we do something new or different. We are complementing the same message that these teenagers are already hearing by the time they get there. And so any decisions that are made at Somersault, we don't feel like we get the opportunity to take credit for. we feel like, hey, we got to complement what was already being the groundwork that was already being laid. We got to be a part of that. And so I think you're right on that. I think it can be easy, for students to,
Yeah.
um, to highlight something big when actuality what's happened is what's happened small has been what's most
And,
important.
and and Brad popped a question in chat about, how large events, DNOWs, camps, and even our back to school events, whatever we're doing, they can springboard us into positive ministry momentum. I think it's how we use them. I know some guys, and I'm not knocking youth ministry leaders. I was there, man. All of our focus sometimes can be just events, and they're
Yeah.
just one-off events. They look successful on paper. We can, you know, uh, float the picture up on announcements on Sunday morning, talk about how successful it was, and we move on. But I think in our intentionality. I do think that large group events do provide momentum,
Yeah.
but those large group events must keep pushing back into that ongoing programming. Now, I know that it's not as cool to talk about, hey, come to Sunday school or come to life group or Bible study fellowship. It's cooler, hey, man, come to the back to school event where we're going to have tons of food and games and excitement. We're going to give away, AirPods or something. We're going to, I say that I think everybody's got AirPods nowadays, so we have to come up with a new thing to give away. I don't know what that is. There's no telling what student ministry we're gonna have to give away next. Cars, I don't know. But but I think that are those events, no matter what they are, whether it's even in the local church, the body of doing like a beast feast, all those things have to go back at pushing into the discipleship effort.
Sure.
But a lot of times in student ministry, man, the discipleship side, that's the hard work.
Yeah.
It's the rewarding time, but it's hard work and it's consistent. And so I think those events, kind of to answer Brad's question, they need to be there. Man, I just know that we're not going to have those in Florida for a while. In some places we will, but those are kind of the exception to the rule for us.
Right.
Most of our places, like Tampa, I was talking to a youth pastor today in Tampa, man, events aren't going to happen for a while.
Wow. Okay. Hey, I was just curious too. Some discussion that I've had with, I'm thinking specifically David Bennett from Lake Murray Baptist Church. The question has been, hey, if the focus is off of events and the focus is off of, big things, and we're putting more focus and attention on small group discipleship, things like that. Are there any resources out there that you would say you would highlight? You would say, hey, I've used so and so, or I know a church that's using so and so, that's helped them guide students throughout the discipleship process in a small group. I'm thinking a group of 5 students to 1 adult, something of that nature. I know we've talked a little bit about Matt Rogers' Aspire curriculum that he has. He has actually a student ministry version that's come out that David really likes. I was just curious if you had or had heard of any other resources that guys maybe, instead of them focusing on big events, small group discipleship, and this is what they're doing with their students when they meet either virtually or face to face.
The Bible.
Yes, the Bible, of
Sorry.
course.
There
Which
had to be
which
there
which
had to be
version?
said. I'm just kidding.
ESV or ESV guy?
Yeah. No, the New Living. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes.
Yeah, I really don't. I probably have that on my Bible app, but anyway. No, I think there are some great resources. Obviously, it goes without saying we want to be in the Word first, but
Sure.
a book that I have actually had some success with a group of high school guys, and actually we kind of floated it out to some college guys in my local church. My church just hired a youth pastor. I've been leading it for a couple of years. And so I'm thankful we have a youth pastor. And now I think I'm going to pray for me. I think I'm going to take over the college ministry for a while.
Nice.
And we're excited about it. But a book that we went through with some of the high school guys is called Being a Christian by Jason Allen. He's the president of Midwestern. And yeah, it's not a huge book. But it's 8 chapters based on like topics, like how the gospel impact your family, your marriage, your recreation, your vocation. And so what we found, I'm just being, super real. It was a resource that high school boys would actually read
Yeah,
because it just wasn't, super thick. Hey man, we all want students to go through Dietrich Bonhoeffer, The Cost of
sure,
Discipleship.
absolutely.
We all have to have realistic expectations with what they're going to read. You know what I mean? So it's like saying, "Hey, here's Mere Christianity. Y'all read that. We'll discuss it." You know, um, So, but the Being a Christian was good. Matt Rogers, the Bible study, the Seven Arrows, is really good.
I
You know,
love Seven Arrows.
Matt's got that. Of course, anything right now, Robbie Gallaty puts his name on with discipleship seems to be super popular. I see Brad put the book there in there. Thank you
Yeah.
in the chat. So there's a book. I think it was. I have to look it up. There was a book on discipleship, strategic discipleship, that was kind of a spiritual formation workbook. But during this COVID period, my wife, we have remodeled almost every room in our home. And as a result of that remodel is I had to rearrange my books and they're sitting in my garage. So I used to go grab it. So
Right.
yeah, I'm thankful that work is in her future. Not in a bad way.
Your living room looks good, man. Good
Well,
job.
hey, it's part of it is not finished. So anyway, but man, we've done more home projects as we've been working from home. So anyway, but
Nice.
yeah, I think those are all good resources. And man, I would say this: sometimes we move on to the next new book. There are some older books out there that are great to walk students through, and there's a couple of John Ortberg books. There's a couple of that are simple. I think when I say
Yeah.
simple books that students will read, you
Yeah.
know,
Rich, what's the resource that you're highlighting here? Tell us a little bit about that.
I didn't know about it until we had the meeting with Richard Ross, and I went to look it up, and it looks like something that we might want to look into using in our church. So we haven't started yet, but just looking into it, they have 6 years of discipleship planned out for you. And each one of those years is like a brown year, blue year, red year, whatever. So it doesn't say that this is for 6th graders, 7th graders, or whatever. It just says here's 6 years, and you can completely, twist it around and use, each session however you want to. But each one of our small group leaders could, take their group through one track and another group take theirs through a different track. They don't even have to be on the same page, just according to what, we think they're interested in doing. It's completely free.
Is it?
So,
what's the website?
I always like free.
What's the website, Rich?
Disciple6.com.
Okay. All right. Very good. Very good.
And Rich, I think on there, am I right that like if they go through it, they get discounted tuition if they end up going to Southwestern or whatever? Is that still
Really?
part of it?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I said Southeastern and Southwestern. Yeah.
Yeah. I think they get some kind of discount.
Are
They
you being
probably
for
do.
real? Or
I
are
haven't
you
looked
kidding
into
with
that.
me?
I'm not kidding. I think they
I think
they
so.
get, is it called the Criswell College? That's the undergrad there. I think they may get a discount if they go through the plan.
Okay. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. All right. I have one last question, and then we'll see if we have any others before we wrap up today. The last question I've got is, with the situation with schooling, there's this tension going on right now. Do we do online virtual, straight online virtual? Do we do hybrid? What happens to families that have both parents working, or maybe a single parent who works? How do we, I guess what my question is, how can the local church potentially help in a situation like that where, parents are in dire straits of being unsure what to do with their kids when they're supposed to be at work and their kids are at home? How could you see the local church potentially helping out with a situation like that?
Yeah, so we had a Zoom yesterday with kid and student ministry leaders about this topic. So here's what we've seen, or what they were talking yesterday. The elementary side, they were looking at hosting some type of hybrid, because Florida, I think it was Florida has waived certain zoning or coding or permits that you have to have. And so that churches could host like learning centers for students who are doing virtual school, especially for people who didn't maybe not have internet or Wi-Fi at home, reliable Wi-Fi. In one church, actually, the school system was going to put a Wi-Fi router there at their church to help, you know. So they were working through that. And then it also would provide, like, if parents have to work, it would provide opportunity for a place for their kids to not be at home all day.
Right.
The church issues with that, especially with elementary, was, man, you got to feed them, you got to supervise them. It's a little different. The middle and high school side, the conversations that came about yesterday was not so much as much structure, but maybe tutors through the school that were available certain times. And then for those students who are doing all virtual, provide some type of interactions, the social interactions and things during the week. I'll be honest with you, Bryant, the big issue that everybody on the call had was, if we're not doing small groups on our Sunday morning campus for discipleship, if we're still backing up with our church with who can come in and how do we clean and how do we social distance, how can we use our facility Monday through Friday to go against what we're doing on Sunday?
Wow.
It wasn't a desire to not do it. It was, man, we've been telling our people we can't meet. We can't gather in small groups. We can't do Sunday school or Bible study, fellowship, life group, whatever. And then we're going to do it for this. So, man, it is a great need, especially in some of for some of our bigger cities. Our churches just don't have the answers right now.
Yeah.
They have ideas, but most of our schools, like for us, today's August 13th, most of our schools aren't going back to August 24th or 31st. And then we have one, they're supposed to start school the 24th. And in Hillsborough County, the Tampa area, they may make a decision between now and then to just do all virtual for the first 9 weeks. So everything's just up in the air, but churches are talking about it, but I haven't seen any church with a clear plan. I said a lot to say nothing. So
no,
I mean,
that makes sense. It does make me wonder if that means we should be reconsidering our thoughts as far as meeting is concerned, if the schools are meeting, but maybe not. I don't pretend to be an expert in that and to know the right answer, but it just does make me wonder. Any last questions from anyone before we kind of wrap up and so forth? All right, last question. Tell us about Tiger Right Bluefan Y7 Z under T8. What is that play? What's the formation? Why does it work?
Yeah. So honestly, I mean, Brian asked me, I was a backup quarterback in Florida and all that stuff he was saying earlier. And that was my favorite play. We put it in against Auburn in 99. And the reason I like to play is back when shotgun was not as popular as it today. And we went 5 wides and, whatever. It put a lot of pressure on the safeties. So it ended up being a touchdown, and we would hide. It kind of hit a receiver going out, because basically it was a high-low play. And if the safety came forward, we threw deep. If we went back, we went under. And it's my favorite play. Here's why. I loved it, and I loved Coach Furry's creativity. But when I was coaching high school football, we were in the playoffs, and we were playing in Tallahassee at Lincoln High School. And I put it in that week. I was the offensive coordinator, and I put it in, and our head coach told me it's not going to work. I said, trust me, it will. And it worked. The safety was a guy named Fred Rouse, who ended up playing at Florida State. And we put him in a bad spot, and it worked for a touchdown, and we won the playoff game based on that. That was the game-winning touchdown. So it kind of became my favorite play later. So, but I'm totally taking credit for a play that Steve Spurrier put in. And, hey, we're youth pastors and coaches are pretty similar. We just cut and paste from somewhere else that works. So that's why. But Anyway, so it was a fun experience. And anytime you can, Auburn occasionally would cause us problems. It wasn't like going to, Columbia where we were just getting a bunch of points that we could get.
Right. Exactly.
90s were different. Y'all hired that Seminole guy, Brad Scott, man. And so it just added to our hatred.
The worst decision. It set us back. Oh, yeah. I could talk about that forever. Anyway,
I could talk youth ministry and college football forever, but I will say this. When Coach Spurrier, who is my favorite Gator of all time, he went to South Carolina, I had South Carolina hats and hoodies and T-shirts, and I rooted for South Carolina when they played Florida. Now, I don't now, even though I think Florida gave up on Muschamp a little too soon. But I knew a lot of folks there, and I pulled for South Carolina. When was it whatever year it was where South Carolina lined up to kick the field goal, but Florida won. They probably were going to be playing the SEC title game.
I was at that game
in Gainesville.
Yes,
and they blocked that field goal.
Yes,
I was at some friend's house. I literally walked outside because I was pulling for South Carolina, but I was living closer to Gainesville, and I was a Gator alum. So I walked outside because I didn't want to see the result. I didn't want to see Coach Spurrier hurt, but I wanted Florida to win. So I left the house for a while and then came back. But
yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
Hey, man, I want to say thank you so much for allowing me to be on this call. I love youth ministry. That's what I do. And I'll be on youth ministry conversations all day and could do this forever. But Bryant, thank you so much. I appreciate you and for your work and for the guys who are on here. And thanks for the opportunity.
If the guys wanted to connect with you, what would be the best way for them to do that after this?
Yeah, man, I can pop my email in here. And anytime, if I can be of any help in any way, I'm grateful, and don't have all the answers. I have more questions than answers, but
same.
And thank you, Bryant.
Same. Billy, appreciate your time with us. Just guys want to highlight for next month. We typically do these Zoomcasts on Thursdays. It's typically the second Thursday of every month. The reason why we choose the second Thursday is we try to we know that a number of student ministry guys also have children's ministry responsibilities, and Kathy Miles hosts a Zoomcast that she does for her children's ministry leaders. So I always try to make sure that our Zoomcast is on a different Thursday. I think hers is on the first Thursday, mine's on the second Thursday. So the only difference is that next month, because of our student ministry lunches that we're doing around the state, we'll probably meet on Wednesday instead of Thursday. So Wednesday, September 9th, not Thursday, is going to be the day that we meet. And we'll be having Andy Blanks from YM360. Haven't nailed down just because I've been out of town with anniversary and vacation. Haven't been able to nail down our topic quite yet, but we will let you know ASAP what that topic will be. And so just wanted to give you guys the heads up on that. But Billy, man, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you spending time with us. It's good for me to hear what other student ministry leaders, what they're facing, their challenges, because I don't typically have the right answers, but the more conversations that we get to have with one another, we typically are able to learn from one another and basically be able to point to each other as far as, hey, I know someone who's faced that challenge and doing it really well. And so I just want to say thanks for giving us your time, man. It's really, really appreciated.
Honored to be a part.
Let me pray for us and then we'll be done. Father, Lord God, I just thank you for this opportunity for us to meet. God, I know that probably for a lot of us, we're sick of Zoom. We're sick of meeting, not being able to meet face to face, God. But Father, I do pray that during this time, Lord, that we still are being sharpened. We're being challenged. We're thinking critically about how we can move the needle when it comes to students' lives being changed by the power of the gospel. And God, we're dependent upon you. We can't do this on our own. We're not creative, smart enough to think about this, to make this happen on our own. We are in need of your power, the power that the Holy Spirit provides, Lord. And so, God, we love you and we trust you and we thank you for all these things in the name of Jesus and in faith. Amen. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time.